The voice you are about to hear is Joni Ivey, a mentor, a tutor, a person who could hand you a meal or a blueprint for change. She's like the godmother of Newport News.
I wouldn't say that, but I've been active since I was a teenager in community engagement. I was in D.C. for 25 years, and when I retired, I came back home to Newport News, and I chose to locate myself in the southeast community of Newport News, which is the historical African-American community. I grew up here. My grandmother's home place is about 5 blocks from here, and living in the southeast, there are some challenges. I mean, you hear gunshots, but I think on the whole, people who live here decide to live here. I know my neighbors. This is called Christopher Shore, so I know practically everybody in this community. I used to know everybody.
And she means everybody.
I knew Mrs. Downing Gross. She was an amazing shero, and every time I go by that building, I think of the work that she did with the Office of Economic Opportunity. But I was fortunate enough to be a debutante for one of Mrs. Downing Gross's social groups. And my mother wanted me to be a debutante, and I really did not want to be a debutante. The first meeting we went, and it was several doctors' daughters and people that I didn't know. We were taught all of the social graces, and then we had to learn how to do a dance, but I just didn't want to be in it, but I did it. I toughed it out for my mother. That was my senior year in high school in 1971. I survived, though. I survived. I went to George Washington Carver High School. It was an African-American school. We found out probably 2 days before graduation. In fact, while we were rehearsing, our principal came in and told us that the school would cease to be in high school in September, and we would be the last graduating class. And we were heartbroken because when you close your school, when you want to have reunions, there's no school. And so our class was the last graduating class.
That was in 1971, brought on by a lawsuit the year before by the NAACP against Newport News for operating a dual school system.
But life was so special going to Carver because you knew your friends. You knew your school friends because basically you were with them from elementary school to high school. And so you establish a bond that you can't break. And I often tell my friends that they are a part of whatever success I made in my career because I practice on them. One of my friends ran for student council president. First of all, it was one of my classmates who was really, really smart. He passed several years ago, Wilbert Ash. I always like to be a behind-the-scenes organizer, and my friends will tell me that I'm always the boss, telling people what to do. But we just organized and talked to other people in the school. And I had a big family, so my sister was in a lower grade, so she was talking to her classmates, and his brother was in the same class that my sister, so they were organizing. And I can't even remember who we beat, but it certainly made me comfortable about elective anything. So I always credit him with giving me the opportunity to experience elective politics. I practiced on him and we won. And he was very conscientious about things for students. And he was the author of having a pep rally without administrators. And he could persuade Mr. Hines to do anything. In fact, we could persuade Mr. Hines. But Mr. Hines was before his time. He was innovative and creative. Mr. Hines taught leadership, and he did, and Miss Crittenden. They taught leadership.
And they taught it by example. Mr. Hines was the first principal of Carver High School, and Miss Crittenden was the counselor. The school's motto, "Forward ever, backward never," led many students to become history makers and chain breakers.
In fact, she was very instrumental in my brother's career. My brother, who is 3 years older than me, went to Carver till the 8th grade, and she saw that he had potential, because if he stayed here, he probably would be mischievous. But so she helped him get into Yale to a summer program. And my parents, who had 7 children, mind you, said, we can't afford it. And he went to Miss Crittenden, and she came back and talked to my parents and said, he has to go. We don't have a choice. We have to go. And so he sort of set the bar for every other child in my mother and dad's family. My mother and dad had 7 kids, and my father died at 57. So my mother was a young widow. She managed to send all of her kids to college and give us off to a good start. But that was the kind of thing Mrs. Crittenden, Margaret and Elmore Davis, and Mr. Hines, they were providing opportunities prior to desegregation. There's so many gifted students who went to Ivy League schools in the 60s and who excelled, even though things were different. Like when I was at Carver and got my book, it was all marked up, scratched up, marked up. In fact, we had to get brown bags and do a book cover because the cover was so bad. But we didn't even realize that we were getting hand-me-down books, but we knew they were all marked up, all written over. And that's the kind of books we got, and that's the kind of desks we got. But it did not stop our learning. What occurred with desegregation, we lost 2 African-American high schools, Huntington and Carver. And I asked my mama, why did y'all fight to keep one of those schools? Because every other city, Richmond kept Armstrong and they kept Maggie Walker. Norfolk kept Booker T. Portsmouth kept I.C. Norcom. And we didn't fight. And our parents thought that with desegregation, it would be so much that, but as I got older, that did something to the community, because when you have a school in your neighborhood, then that's when kids meet kids at the football game. You know, I could go to a football game in high school. The stadium, Huntington, was right in the community, and Friday nights, that's where everybody met at the football games. So when we closed Carver and Huntington, there was no football, and we had to go up to Todd Stadium, which many of the parents didn't have transportation. So that meant their children didn't get to experience going to high school football games, which in the African-American culture, that was one of the things to do on Friday and Saturday night, because everybody played football and people followed it. And it's just so many things like that were lost. Elementary school, my Brownie teacher was my 2nd grade teacher. My Girl Scout teacher was my 4th grade teacher. Both my 1st grade teacher and my 2nd grade teacher are still living. That is very unreal. Barbara Crump was my 1st grade teacher, and Barbara Williams was my 2nd grade teacher. But it was nothing for your teacher to show up at your house, which we lost, teachers, and it was nothing to see your teacher in the store, see your teacher at the movie theater, So, they were moving in the community, and we didn't see that after desegregation. I think visits to the homes probably ceased, but I think that was important, to be able to see your teacher, look up and see your teacher knocking on your door. Or, for instance, I belonged to the sociology club, and my 12th grade teacher took us to New York. We saw a play. He thought it was everybody's first. It wasn't, because my aunts lived in New Jersey, New York. We went there mostly every summer. But the majority of the class, it was their first time out of the city, and a trip to New York to see a play, and to see certain things that we wouldn't have seen. Those are the kinds of things that, can you imagine? And it was another teacher and Teddy Hicks' wife and Mr. Hicks, and then it's the Holcombs. I don't know what possessed them to take a bus full of 11th and 12th graders to New York. And we did behave. We did. We did. Wink, wink. We did. We fought very hard to get Heritage High School. And many people don't know how that was done, but it was basically a group of people meeting in the basement of Flora Crittenden's home who worked together to get Heritage High School. It was spearheaded by Chuck Allen, who was on council at the time and who worked for planning and somehow was laid off his job. And then when he was laid off, some people convinced him to run for council, and he did. But anyway, we had weekly meetings. That parcel of land was the only remaining parcel that was large enough for a high school. And we were going up against a developer who wanted to put housing, which was a good thing, but we needed a high school in the community. And Chuck, through his negotiating, and Larry Dillard, who was very passionate about Heritage, and Miss Crittenden, who let us meet at her house, we just kept pushing it. And most people don't know it, but Heritage and Woodside is the same school. We used the same plans. They're laid out exactly. So what that meant, it was no, this community gets this and that community gets that. The schools are the same. They're the exact same. And they were built together, and it was hatched out of Flora Crittenden's basement at 5012 Madison Avenue. That's some of the little projects that came about that I was happy to be a part of.
Visit our website, truthbetoldcommunity.com, to find out ways to get involved and share this episode with friends. This series was written by Jackie Glass and Hannah Sobel, edited and hosted by me, Nicole Hill, sound designed by Trindell Lightburn, and our work has been supported by the Virginia African American Cultural Center through a grant from the Virginia Tourism Corporation. Follow our work by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. We couldn't do this without people brave enough to share their experiences. So thank you, Miss Joni Ivey.